You are the founder of Auntie Anne's Pretzels, and it's crazy how like cultural iconic that brand that you created is. Like when we first met you, and Joe told us that you were going to be there, we're like, there's a real Auntie Anne? Like, really? Like, that's a real thing? And like, because if you've ever been into a mall or an airport or anywhere in America, like, you know what that, like, if you say that, you know what it smells like immediately, right?
Hey,
So,
listen, yeah, I found my way to Auntie Anne's stores. I knew they were in the mall, but I didn't know where they were, like what location. And I would start to smell, and I would just follow my nose, and it always took me there.
amazing. It's incredible. And it was just such a pleasure to meet you and see how real you were and how amazing you were, and just to learn more about, your story. So let's just go back a little bit, like maybe like right before Auntie Anne's came to be, right? Pretzels.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what was life like then? What were you doing? Have you always been an entrepreneur, or was this something that just kind of, this was a pivot in your life or a fork in the road? What was happening before you started that business?
Well, it was certainly a fork in the road, and it was something that we did not see coming. Let me take you back a little bit to my background, which is I grew up in an Amish farm in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And mom and dad, old order Amish with horse and buggies. But as a toddler, they went on to what we call the black car Amish. So I grew up in the Amish community, but my mom and dad had a black car. My dad could farm with tractors instead of horses. And we had electricity in the home. So in that regard, we looked like Amish, but I knew we were not Amish. Now, people looking
right.
on would never have noticed. So anyway, growing up in that culture, Shane, it was a very, I want to say, simplistic. It was there were boundaries for us. There was a hard work ethic. I worked with my mom in the kitchen. There were 8 of us kids. And at an early age, I had allergies, which back in the day, anything that looked like it or seemed like an allergy, they would call it hay fever. So I knew that mom and dad knew that I couldn't work outside in the fields or in the gardens a whole lot because it would bother me. And so I became mom's helper in the kitchen. Then I learned how to cook. And if you want a really good Amish meal, Shane, if you'll just bring your family on down to my home, I'd be happy to cook you an Amish meal.
I'm going to hold you to that one. I'm going to hold you to that one.
It's not gourmet, I can promise you that, but it is good. But so during those years, I learned how to bake and cook, and mom and dad went to market to Philadelphia 3 nights a week. And on Thursday night after school, that was the only time my mom was not in the kitchen when I got home from school, because her and dad went to market. Mom would have a list of cakes and pies that she wanted me to bake. And I was 11 and 12 years old. And I remember looking at that list that she had put on the kitchen counter, and she would call me Annabeth. And she said, Annabeth, tonight I want you to make whatever, the amount of pies, cakes, cookies, whatever it was that they needed to sell. So I ended up making 50, 60, 70, or 80 pies and cakes all by myself in the basement of our home. And my dad had bought a really, really big pizza oven so that I could bake at least 60 pies at one shot.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
But it was all from scratch. And that, Shane, there was many lessons at that point in my life. It was the lesson of, entrepreneurs, I believe the successful ones do what they don't feel like doing. Mm-hmm. And I learned during that time and on the farm life, but particularly during that time, I remember crying as I went down the steps. I can remember that feeling right now as I'm telling you this. I did not want to do that by myself, but I did. Why? Because I wanted to please mom and dad. And I knew, and it wasn't like this big hurrah. Thank you so much, Annabeth, for doing this. You're doing a great job. Not verbal, but I knew when I got to market on Saturday, I would go with my dad, and he was so proud of me. And he would tell every customer that was buying a cake or a pie that my daughter made these pies and cakes. And I could feel the pride, even though he never really said that. So I'm saying all that to say my background, just work ethic. We also learned how to play together. We also knew how to sit together at the table 3 times a day, not 3 times a week, but morning, noon, and dinner time. So the disciplines is really what set me up, Shane.
For success.
Without that, I would never have been able to accomplish and do what we did with Auntie Anne's. Fast forward just a little bit. My husband and I got married. I was young at 19. It's what every little Amish girl wants to do, marry a good looking guy, Amish guy. It had to be an Amish guy. And the day I met Jonas and married him 3.5 years later, I knew that day I had hit the jackpot, because what I knew about Jonas was he was a hard worker and he loved God more than he loved me. And that's pretty important in any marriage. And so from that point on, we were happily married. Our dream and our goal was just to simply, have our very own family, be involved in the community.
What did he do? What did he do at the time? Was he just a farmer, or what was he?
He grew up on a farm as well, but he ended up being a car mechanic, because at the age of 16, his dad wanted to buy him a horse and buggy, which is typical of Amish families. At 16, you get your own horse and buggy. And he told his dad, I don't want to be Amish. I don't want a horse and buggy. And his dad said, well, if you want a car, then you're going to have to find you a car, and I can't help you do that. My husband went to the junkyard, found a 1950 Chevrolet, and he brought it home, towed it home somehow, and he fixed that car up, and he became the body man in the county. He was just a great body man. Ended up working many years later in Austin on really high-end cars at Cox Collision in Austin, Texas. So that was he loved to do that. But he was always was very inquisitive, always figured things out. And today he can fix anything you will ask him to fix. But that part of his mind is what really helped him later on in life. A few years later, in 1974, we had 2 daughters by that time, Luana and Angela, and we were living the dream, Shane. We were living the dream. We were in this spiritual high. We got to know Jesus. We got to experience him in a relationship rather than in just a religion. And we were just so excited about life. And I always wanted to be a good girl. And my dad never had to spank me. I mean, I guess I was a good girl. I don't know. And so that was my goal, to be a good girl and to please God and to be a good wife. And in 1975, all of that changed for us. And it was September the 8th. It was a beautiful fall morning. And our sweet baby girl, she was 19 months and 12 days. And Angela Joy was walking to my mom and dad's house. We lived out in the country they lived on a farm. We had a double wide trailer at that time. And she would always come see my mom. And that particular morning, Angie made her way to my mom's house. And my sister, who was driving a Bobcat, did not see Angie. And as my sister backed the Bobcat up and she went to move it forward, she saw Angie's lifeless body in front of her.
Oh, my God.
So that changed my life, obviously.
Your sister, did she come running? What happened?
She ran away.
Oh, God. Yeah.
They found her later in just a pile of weeds in the farm somewhere. And my dad came running with Angie's body in his arms, just running and wailing. And just all he could say was, I think she's dead. I think she's dead. And I it's traumatic. You can't, to go back to that. I remember it clearly, but it's really, really difficult to explain.
Yeah, for sure.
But from that point on, as Angie made her ascent into heaven that day, and I knew that's where she was, I began my gradual descent into a world of pain and emotional pain and spiritual confusion. Because remember, I wanted to be a good girl. I thought I was a good girl. I was doing all the right thing. Not perfect, but I was a pretty good girl, pretty good wife.
Yeah.
And so spiritually confused, the first question we ask when tragedy strikes, well, I don't know why we do this, but we do. Why God? Why did you let this happen to me? And what I know today, Shane, is that life is hard. God is good. But at that time I was confused and I thought that life is good and that God was harsh. And so feeling like, why did this happen to me? I went into this place of spiritual confusion. My husband and I drifted apart, stayed together in the marriage. The Great Wall of China was the emotional wall. It was huge. We could no longer connect. A few months later, I found myself going to my pastor's office and for help and for comfort. And before I left his office that day, he took advantage of me and made me promise not to tell anyone. And because if I told anyone, nobody would believe me. And so, wow, that was the beginning then of 7 years. I say that he took me into the dark world And I found I learned how to navigate in that world, and existed there. I don't survived and existed basically. So we had another baby. So I was trying to be a mom with two little girls, and trying to be a wife and living a double life, and got into this sexually abusive relationship and stayed there. And I really truly felt like there was no way out.
The story is incredible, and your books are incredible. We and Jocelyn have went through them, and like the whole thing's amazing. And like you see so many people, like this 7-year period where you were like in the dark world. Like you see so many people go into that, and like they don't come out of it. And and we're going through these valleys. The valleys sometimes just seemed endless. Like, what was the spark of hope or the moment that pulled you out of that? Like, was it like a friend or a colleague, or was it your business idea? Because Auntie Anne's had not even been created yet. Like what pulled you out of that 7-year valley? Like, what ended it?
I was so desperate, and I weighed 90 pounds. I was so angry. I hated who I'd become. I believed I was unlovable, unchangeable, and unforgivable. And one day, I prayed my way through. I cried my way through those 7 years, always asking God to deliver me. Isn't that what we do when we're in trouble? We ask God to help us and deliver us, and He didn't. And so I'm mad at God. And I was on my knees one day, and God just said to me, when I say said, there was this huge, He interrupted my thoughts, and He said, go tell Jonas, my husband, what's going on in your life. And I call it the new view of confession. James 5:16, confess your faults one to another, and you'll be healed. And I believe that healing is a relational healing between me and my fellow man, my husband, my children. Be real with them. And so, man, fear and trembling, I did. And I went out to his body shop, and I made a very 2-sentence confession. And the look in his eyes, there was no hug, there was no forgiveness exchange. There was nothing exchanged, except the look in his eyes said to me that, wow, he's going to divorce me. And that's what I was afraid of. And I turned and walked away. But that story's in my book. And Jonas and I are married 53 years, going on our 54th year. So Jonas was challenged at that time, which I didn't know. He fell on his knees and just was completely devastated. And he was challenged on his knees. If you will love your wife like I love you, there's hope for your marriage. And that story's in my book. And we could spend the next 30 minutes. I know that we want to talk about Auntie Anne's. And what I do want to say is that single, hard, difficult, humiliating, I was so filled with shame, confession to my husband. I had no idea that would change the trajectory of our lives. The power of being real, the power of confession. Secrets kill you. You're going to die.
Yeah. Like you can't erase a secret that you haven't told someone. Like it just stays in you. And every minute that you wake up, because I have a saying that I tell people all the time, greatness flows through your lips and your fingertips. And like, if you don't let those things come out of you through words and writing, it will just eat you alive inside, Absolutely. And that's what was happening to me. And so, again, my husband being a very quiet, kind, hardworking, loving father and husband, saw us through that time. And we ended up going for marriage counseling. Yeah. And so Jonas, being inquisitive and his mind always working, trying to figure things out, he was thinking, how can this happen? How did this happen to me in my home without me knowing about it for 7 years? Nobody knew, Shane. That's the evil of secrets, like whether it's abuse or whatever it may be. The secrets, it's you can actually live a secret your whole life, and nobody will ever know. And it's a prison the enemy holds you in, basically. It's the strongest walls he can put around you as a secret. Absolutely. And what I say about confession, the new view of confession, it is the highest form of communication, because it lets you be real. It lets you be who you are, and you cannot be who you are unless you really verbalize and talk and communicate and open your life. There's a verse in the Bible that says, walk in the light. Yeah.
as he is in the light. And then we have fellowship, and then we are forgiven. So
Amazing.
it's all about bringing our deeds into the light. So we began this journey with counseling, and Jonas got so intrigued, and we went to a counseling center in Akron, Ohio, many years later. And that's where he became very interested in counseling himself. And so he began that journey of online counseling. He became a pastoral counselor.
Amazing.
And just amazing. And so he wanted to counsel families free of charge. And so it's what he did. And guess what? When you do something free of charge, your bank account stays flat.
Yes, it does.
Literally.
Yes.
So one day I had the opportunity to work at a farmer's market in Lancaster County. And the guy asked me, do you want to manage my stand? I'm like, I'm still feeling, I'm not okay. I've come a long way. I did some things that kept us in the marriage. Jonas did some things, that we were intact and we were happily married after a few years of working together. Hard work, meaning counseling and all that. And so we got to that point. I said to him, hon, I really want you to be able to do what you've done. I mean, I honor you. I so respect you. I'm still grateful to this day that he kept not only my family together, but he kept me sane.
Yeah.
And took me to a place of healing. So I said, I'm going to go to work. And he said, well, we need some food on the table and so why don't you go to work and make the dough, And so I literally went to work. And
ironic there that he said, go make the dough. That's a little irony there for you. Go make some dough. All right. I think I can make some pretzel dough.
Again, it was not our plan. It was just what God put in our path, is what we did. So when I started Auntie Anne's at that time, I would say I was still pretty broken in many ways. My self-esteem was still pretty low, there was hardly any of that day, I didn't have that because I was still feeling very guilty and sort of weak and some shame. And not that he made me feel that way, but it was so deep. But what I had when we started Auntie Anne, Shane, is I had a great purpose. And the purpose was Jonas wanted to do free counseling. And in order to do that, I needed to make money so that he could actually do that. So when we started, we made $200 and some a week. And
was this at a farmer's market? You said you started making the pretzels just at a stand or something?
Correct.
Yeah.
In Lancaster County, there are many farmers markets in Lancaster County. So it was, a stand in the market. And so I began making pretzels. There's a story behind that. The first day in business, I managed the store for about 7 months, and I was making $250 a week. And Jonas we were both happy because he could do marriage counseling to his heart's content. And he did it in the community, in the church, and some of it out of our home and wherever. And people just came. And anyway, and so when I started, we had what I knew was a great purpose, and we had a great product, and we had great people. The three things that I had that was enough. But what I did not have was formal education, had no capital, and I had no business plan.
This is something we talk a lot about when people have like their idea for their business in our company. And like you think of something, people think of their ideas not with enough, I don't know what the word is, esteem maybe. Like, you had a pretzel. Like a lot of people would just be like, well, that's a pretzel. No, you had a mission. You had the purpose. The pretzel meant something. Like there was love being injected into every one of those like pretzels when they were being cooked, because there was something other than the pretzel that was important on the other side of it. And like that's what if you're an entrepreneur, like you have to have that mission behind the product if you're going to be able to do anything.
Well, yeah, because without that purpose, the mission for us was to be light, salt and light in the world of business, and it was also the purpose was to give. So it was a twofold purpose. And if you don't have the purpose, it's just too hard.
I know,
to do business without a reason. What's the why behind what you're doing?
Because the bad days, when they get bad, it becomes like a job.
Absolutely.
But when the bad day, you have a mission, you're like, this is what God gave me my purpose. So I got to go do the thing, right? Yep.
And and you're so right, because every time I was done, so we went from one store to two the first year, and then 12 the next year. And the following year we did 35 stores, and the next year was 50 to 55. So from day one, it was a fast growth for me, and never having owned a business, never not
learning on the fly a little bit, were you?
I learned on the fly. I mean, growing up in the Amish culture, I had an 8th grade education, but I had a hard work ethic, and I love people, and I had a purpose.